Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel Michael Stories. Welcome to today's new video. Watch the full video. I hope you will enjoy the video. But before moving forward, subscribe my channel and press the bell icon. The old Ford pickup rumbled down the long, winding gravel road, each crunch beneath its tires a familiar beat. It had been nearly 3 weeks since I'd last heard that sound, a lifetime spent in the sterile clamor of the city. As I crested the final hill, the sight of my lake cabin ranch, nestled against the treeline, washed over me like a wave of cool water. The low afternoon sun was a soft, buttery glow, filtering through the pines and casting long shadows across the porch. It was the kind of evening that felt like a reward for all the hustle, a promise of quiet and peace. My family had owned this land for generations. My grandfather, a man who believed in the sweat of his brow and the honesty of a handshake, had built the cabin himself in the 1960s. He'd taught me how to fish the lake, how to read the clouds for a coming storm, and how to tell the difference between a pine's whisper and a cedar's sigh. The land wasn't just a place to live. It was a part of my DNA. It was the one place where the modern world's endless noise, the constant rules, the demands, the expectations, fell away, leaving only the essentials. But as I rounded the last bend toward my driveway, that serenity evaporated. A shiny silver SUV, a beacon of urban entitlement, was parked squarely across the narrow entrance to my property. It wasn't just blocking the path. It was positioned with an almost defiant arrogance, as if daring me to move it. My jaw tightened. I cut the engine, and the sudden silence felt heavy and charged. The door of the SUV opened, and out stepped a woman in a crisp red blazer. She had a severe, no-nonsense haircut and a chin tilted up at an angle that suggested she was constantly looking down on the world. This was Karen. I didn't know her name then, only her reputation. She was the self-appointed queen of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, a jurisdiction that ended a half-mile back down the main road. But that fact had never stopped her from trying to enforce her brand of order on me. She'd left notes about my unruly lawn, complained about the excessive smoke from my fire pit, and once, she'd even tried to scold me for the sound of my dog's bark. To her, this untamed, wild piece of land was an eyesore, a blight on her perfectly manicured kingdom. She crossed her arms over her blazer and met my stare with a smirk. "You can't drive in here today," she announced, her voice as sharp and cold as a winter wind. "We have a community event, and this road is for residents only." The audacity of her statement hit me with the force of a physical blow. I let out a short, bitter laugh, the kind that starts in your gut and scratches on its way out. "Ma'am," I said, stepping out of the truck and letting the gravel crunch under my boots. "This is my land. This road is my driveway. Your community event is currently trespassing." Her smirk didn't waver. "We all have to follow the rules," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "This isn't just about you. It's about the community." "Karen," I said, using the name I'd heard from a few other longtime neighbors. "My property isn't part of your HOA. Your rules don't mean a damn thing here." She pulled her phone from her pocket and raised it like a shield. "If you so much as touch my car, I'm calling the police." I stood there for a long moment, the cool evening air whipping past my face. 100 different angry comebacks swirled in my head, but I pushed them all down. Playing her game meant I was already losing. My grandfather would have handled this with a quiet, firm resolve. I tried to channel that. "Go ahead," I said, my voice low and steady. "Call them. I'll be here waiting. And while we're at it, I'll have a word with the sheriff about your car blocking my property." The flicker of uncertainty in her eyes was small but telling. She hadn't expected me to call her bluff. She was used to dealing with people who wilted under her gaze, who backed down at the first mention of fines and regulations. I was a different kind of problem. I was rooted in this land, in the history that she didn't and couldn't own. I got back in my truck, the tension in the air thick enough to cut. I sat for a minute, my hands tight on the steering wheel, and then, slowly, I put the truck in reverse and backed away. I parked by the edge of the lake, a few hundred yards from the driveway entrance. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple. The sight was breathtaking, but it did little to calm the storm raging inside me. This wasn't just about a driveway. It was about respect, about the right to exist on your own terms, and about drawing a line in the sand, or, in this case, the gravel. That night, I didn't sleep in my cabin. I reclined the seat in my truck, a decision that promised a sore back in the morning, and watched the moonlight dance on the water. My mind, usually quiet and at ease here, was a tempest of thoughts. I replayed the conversation, the smugness in her voice, the self-righteous tilt of her chin. I thought about all the small aggressions that had led to this moment. The passive-aggressive notes, the calls to animal control over my dog, the way she had once stopped to yell at some kids who were innocently skipping stones on my shoreline. This wasn't a sudden escalation. It was the culmination of a slow, steady encroachment on my peace. I closed my eyes and pictured my grandfather, standing on this very land, a quiet giant of a man with dirt under his nails and a knowing look in his eyes. He wouldn't have let this slide. He would have handled it with a quiet strength that made the opponent question their own sanity. I knew I couldn't just give up my driveway. I was going to fight for it. I was going to give her a battle she wanted, and I was going to win. The sun rose, a brilliant orange orb over the lake, casting long, stark shadows. My back ached, and yesterday's coffee in my thermos tasted like regret, but my mind was clearer than ever. I needed to understand Karen, not as a caricature, but as a person, to understand her motivation, to predict her moves. I drove into town, not to the county office yet, but to the small diner where all the real gossip happened. Old Tom was there, nursing a cup of coffee and watching the world go by. Tom had lived in Meadowbrook since before the HOA existed, back when it was just a few families with scattered homes. "Morning, Luke," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Heard you had a run-in with the HOA queen." I sat down and ordered a coffee. "She's something else, isn't she?" "Something else is a polite way to put it," Tom chuckled. "She moved in about 2 years ago, right after her husband retired from some corporate job in the city. He's a quiet guy, keeps to himself. But she came here with a mission to improve things. Started with new rules about lawn care, then got everyone to vote on a ridiculous color scheme for the houses." He lowered his voice. "She's not just a busybody. She's insecure. She needs control. Her old life, all about climbing the corporate ladder and making a name for herself, is gone. So she's trying to build a new little empire out here. Your place, with its old barn and wild grass and history, is a threat to that. It's a reminder that some things can't be tamed, and she can't stand it." Tom's words resonated. Her entire demeanor, the way she held her chin high and spoke with such authority, wasn't confidence. It was a desperate need to be respected, a yearning for power that was hollow at its core. My refusal to bend wasn't just a simple disagreement. It was a rejection of her entire worldview. I thanked Tom, paid for my coffee, and headed for the county clerk's office. It was a small, dusty building that smelled of old paper and ink. I was met by Mr. Henderson, a man as old as the building itself, with reading glasses perched on the tip of his nose. He knew my grandfather, and he knew my family's history on the land. "Well, if it isn't young Luke," he said with a warm smile. "What brings you to my neck of the woods?" "HOA trouble," I said, and watched as his face went from cheerful to grim. "The lady, Karen, is claiming my driveway is community property and wants to fine me for existing, I think." Henderson's smile returned, but with a new, sharper edge. "Let me pull the original deeds. I've seen her type before. Folks get a little power and forget where the lines are drawn." He returned with a stack of yellowed papers. The ink on them faded, but the lines still clear. He pointed to a black-inked border, a line drawn with a steady hand. "This is the original land survey from 1962, when your grandfather bought the place. This line here, that's your driveway. Part of your private property, clear as a summer day. And the HOA's jurisdiction stops a full half-mile down the road. They don't have a leg to stand on." I felt a surge of triumph, a quiet, satisfied feeling. I wasn't just fighting for my driveway. I was fighting for my grandfather's legacy. Henderson made me certified copies, and I held the manila folder like a shield. "I want to be ready for her next move," I said. "She'll come back," he said, a knowing look in his eyes. "People like that can't accept defeat. They'll try a new angle. But you have the law on your side, and that's a weapon more powerful than any truck." He was right. On the drive back, I drove past Karen's SUV, which was now parked a few feet from the entrance to her own driveway, as if she were waiting for me. I didn't stop, but I made sure to hold up the manila folder. Her eyes narrowed as she saw the documents, and I could practically feel her mind churning, trying to figure out what new move I was planning. Back at the cabin, I posted a new sign at the start of my driveway: private property. No unauthorized vehicles. It was simple, but it was official. Then, just for good measure, I parked the old plow truck at the entrance, its rusty steel blade a silent threat. I had the law, the history, and the will to stand my ground. I had a feeling this wasn't just a battle for my driveway anymore. It was a battle for my peace. The morning arrived with the sound of geese honking across the lake. The air was crisp, the sky a deep, vibrant blue. My back was sore from the night in the truck, but a strange sense of calm had settled over me. This was it. The final act, I hoped. I was finishing my coffee on the porch when I heard the familiar growl of Karen's SUV. She came down the road slowly, as if on patrol, and pulled up to the entrance of my driveway, stopping just short of my new sign. She was alone this time. She stepped out of her car, her chin held high. "Take that sign down," she barked, her voice sharp. "You're in violation of community guidelines." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Karen," I said, my voice calm, "that sign is on my land, and your community guidelines don't apply here." "Oh, really?" she said, her lips curling into a smug smirk. "We're fining you for harassment and for blocking community access. You'll be hearing from our lawyer." I walked to the barn, my boots crunching on the gravel. I could hear her muttering behind me, her voice a buzzing mosquito. I pushed open the heavy wooden door and climbed into my old Ford pickup. The engine roared to life, a deep, satisfying rumble that filled the morning air. I put the truck in gear and slowly, deliberately, began to ease it forward. The plow blade, a heavy steel monster I usually used for clearing snow, was still mounted on the front. I lined the truck up directly with her SUV. Karen stopped talking. Her eyes went wide as she watched me. "What do you think you're doing?" she yelled, her voice breaking. I rolled down the window. "I told you, Karen. You're not blocking my driveway again." "You wouldn't dare," she shrieked, fumbling with her phone. "I'm filming this. You'll regret it." "Go ahead," I said, inching the truck closer. The plow's edge was a foot from her bumper. "Get my good side. Tell the world how you blocked my driveway and got plowed out of the way." Panic flickered in her eyes. This wasn't a game she was prepared for. She had a plan for every argument, every fine, every letter. But she didn't have a plan for a man with a plow truck who wasn't afraid to use it. She scrambled back into her SUV, fumbled with the gear shift, and with a screech of tires, she backed up and sped off down the road. The tension drained from my body in a single, cathartic rush. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from the raw adrenaline of standing my ground. I had won, but I knew this wasn't the end. Karen was the kind of person who saw every retreat as a temporary setback, every defeat as a reason to come back stronger. She was a schemer, a plotter, and she wouldn't rest until she had her revenge. The next day, a thick envelope arrived. It wasn't a fine or a demand letter. It was an official-looking document with the HOA's letterhead, signed by Karen and her two cronies from the board. They had hired a lawyer. The letter was a masterpiece of legal bluffing. They claimed my property, due to its proximity to the community access road, was subject to their regulations. They threatened to place a lien on my property, citing aggressive behavior, unauthorized signage, and unlawful obstruction of a common area. The language was designed to intimidate, to make me doubt myself. I didn't panic. I went straight to Marlene Walker's office. Marlene was a local attorney, a woman as sharp as a tack with a reputation for cutting through nonsense. She had handled a couple of cases for me in the past, and she knew the local landscape like the back of her hand. "Karen's at it again," I said, tossing the letter on her desk. Marlene read the letter, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Garbage," she said flatly. "This is garbage, Luke. They don't have jurisdiction, and they know it. They're just trying to scare you." She leaned back in her chair. "You have the deeds and the survey from the county clerk. I'll draft a cease and desist letter. It won't just tell them to back off. It'll inform them that if they so much as step on your property again, you'll file for harassment and trespassing. And if they follow through with this lien threat, you'll sue them for defamation and punitive damages. And I'll name them personally in the lawsuit, not just the HOA." Marlene's plan was beautiful in its simplicity and its brutality. It wasn't a polite suggestion. It was a legal battering ram. She drafted the letter, and within the hour, I had it in my hands. It was a formal, no-nonsense document that laid out every fact, every legal right, and every consequence of their actions. On my way home, I spotted Karen's SUV again, parked a few feet from the community entrance. She was with a couple of her allies, pointing in the general direction of my cabin. I slowed down just long enough to make sure she saw the legal documents on my dashboard. Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was a master of intimidation, but I was about to show her what a real legal threat looked like. The next morning, I drove to the HOA clubhouse. My old plow truck was parked outside, a testament to my willingness to get my hands dirty, but today I was armed with a different kind of weapon. I walked inside, the legal notice tucked under my arm. The meeting room was a sterile, overly bright space with cheap conference tables arranged in a circle. Karen was at the head of the table, her face pale but defiant. Two of her allies were with her, a nervous-looking man and a woman who avoided eye contact. The room went silent the moment I walked in. "You're trespassing," Karen said, her voice a shaky imitation of her usual commanding tone. "That's funny," I said, leaning against the doorway. "It seems to me you're the ones who've been trespassing for weeks. But that all ends today." I walked to the table and placed the legal notice down, sliding it toward her. "Read it. Every word. Because the next time you or any of your board members set foot on my property or try to enforce one of your fake rules, it won't be me asking nicely. It'll be the sheriff hauling you out in handcuffs." Her face flushed as she skimmed the first page. I could see the color draining from her cheeks as she read Marlene's precise, unforgiving language. Her hand trembled as she held the paper. This is outrageous," she stammered. "Outrageous," I said, my voice low and firm. "What's outrageous is you thinking you can bully me with phony fines and fake letters. My family has owned this land for 60 years. You and your HOA have zero authority over it. You step onto my driveway, you park a single wheel on my gravel, and I will sue you personally for harassment. Are we clear?" The room was dead silent. A few of the board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes darting between Karen and me. I could see the cracks in her facade. She wasn't a powerful figure. She was a woman with a desperate need for control, and I was taking it all away. She didn't answer. That was good enough for me. I turned and walked out, leaving her to stew in her defeat. That evening, I set up a new gate at the end of my driveway. It was made of sturdy steel, locked with a heavy chain, and it wasn't just about keeping people out. It was a physical manifestation of the boundary I had drawn. I posted another sign next to it: "Private access only. Violators will be prosecuted." The following morning, Karen drove by. She slowed down when she saw the gate, her face a storm cloud. She didn't stop. She didn't even roll down her window. She just kept going. And I knew then that I had won. For the first time in weeks, I slept like a rock. No tension in my shoulders, no knots in my stomach. The cabin felt like home again, quiet and unbothered, just the way my grandfather had intended when he built it. The next weekend, I threw a small gathering for a few of the neighbors who had supported me through the ordeal. We grilled steaks by the lake, laughed about Karen's failed attempts at control, and toasted to the fact that sometimes the only way to deal with bullies is to stand taller than they expect. Tom, the old-timer, clapped me on the back. "You did what all of us wish we'd done years ago, Luke. You told that HOA to shove it." I grinned. "All it takes is a plow truck and a little backbone." Karen never returned to my driveway after that. The legal notice, the gate, the unyielding front I had put up, it all worked. The war was over, and I had my peace back. The next week was the quietest I had experienced since the conflict began. No SUV blocking my driveway, no angry letters tucked under the gate, and no HOA board members prowling around. I woke early that Sunday morning to the gentle light of dawn spreading over the lake. The water was glassy, reflecting the pink and gold sky, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine through the open window. I brewed a pot of black coffee, stepped onto the porch, and just stood there for a long moment, soaking in the silence. It was the kind of peace I had almost forgotten. The new gate at the end of my driveway glinted in the morning sun, solid and unmoving. I'd installed it with my own two hands, welding the hinges and setting the posts deep into the ground. It wasn't just a gate. It was a line drawn in steel that told the world, "This is mine. Respect it." For the first time in a long time, I felt like the land was truly my sanctuary again. Later that day, I walked down to the lake with my dog trotting beside me. The water was cool and clear, and I sat on the old wooden dock my grandfather had built decades ago. I could almost hear his voice telling me, "Luke, if you don't stand up for your land, no one will." Those words had never felt truer than they did now. I thought about everything that had happened. The shouting matches, the plow truck standoff, the legal battle that finally brought it all to a close. It wasn't just about a driveway or an HOA anymore. It was about a principle, the belief that we have to stand our ground when someone tries to strip away what's ours. Karen had pushed me to my limit, but she had also reminded me of who I was, a man who doesn't back down when he's in the right. A few neighbors stopped by that afternoon. Tom, the old-timer from down the road, brought over a jug of sweet tea and sat with me on the porch. "Well, Luke," he said, grinning, "looks like you gave that HOA a lesson they won't forget anytime soon." I didn't want to fight, I admitted, sipping my coffee. But I wasn't about to let someone like Karen take away the peace I've worked for. This land, it's part of who I am. Tom nodded, his weathered face softening. "You know, a lot of folks around here respect what you did. Not everyone has the guts to stand up to those people. Most just roll over, pay the fees, and hope the trouble stops. You showed them you can't be bullied." We spent the afternoon talking, watching the sun move across the sky. By evening, I lit a fire in the pit by the shore. The flames cracked and popped, sending sparks up into the twilight. I grilled a couple of steaks, and Tom stayed for dinner. As we ate, I felt a sense of gratitude, not just for the food and company, but for the simple fact that I had held on to something worth fighting for. The next morning, I walked the property line, checking the fence and the new private access-only signs I'd posted. Everything was in place. The gravel driveway stretched before me, untouched and clear, leading to the cabin that stood as a symbol of my family's grit and resilience. As I stood there, I realized something. Karen hadn't won a single thing, but she had given me a new perspective. I understood more than ever how important it is to know your rights, to prepare, and to fight when necessary. I wasn't just defending a driveway. I was defending the peace and freedom this land gave me. That evening, I sat on the porch with my dog curled at my feet, watching the last light fade over the lake. The sky turned shades of deep orange and purple, and the world grew quiet, except for the soft hum of crickets. I felt an ache of contentment settle in my chest. Looking back, I didn't regret a single thing. Not the plow showdown, not the heated words, and not the countless trips to the clerk's office. All of it had led to this moment of peace. Karen could keep her HOA meetings, her fake rules, and her smug attitude. None of that mattered now. I took a deep breath, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence wash over me. "This is how it's supposed to be," I murmured to myself. The lake was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that settles into your bones and reminds you of what truly matters. I sat on the porch, watching the fading sun lay a golden path across the water. The plow truck was parked by the gate like a faithful guard, but I no longer felt the tension that had gripped me for weeks. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. I thought of my grandfather, the man who had built this cabin with his own hands. He used to say, "Land isn't just soil and trees. Luke, it's a piece of your soul. Protect it." Those words echoed through me as I looked over the property I had fought so hard to defend. Every board of the porch, every stone in the fire pit, every inch of gravel on the driveway, they all carried my family's history and my sweat. The battle with Karen had been ugly, but it had taught me something about resilience. Standing up for yourself isn't about pride. It's about knowing when silence means surrender and when it's time to push back. I didn't fight because I wanted trouble. I fought because peace is worth defending. As night fell, the lake reflected the stars, each one shimmering like a quiet promise. I leaned back, my dog resting at my feet, and felt a deep, steady calm. No HOA rules, no angry voices, no one trying to take what wasn't theirs. Just me, my land, and the memory of those who taught me to value both. If you've ever stood your ground against something unfair, you know this feeling, the quiet victory of holding on to what matters most. It's not about winning against someone else. It's about winning back your own peace.